Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to The Money Factor, our program that focuses on local business and personal finance topics. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Statistics is not always an easy subject. A lot of us had a hard time with it in school. However, it has been said that it is vital to our understanding of the modern world. That being said, our guest today is Douglas Lonnstrom, Dr. Douglas Lonnstrom, Director of the Siena Research Institute. It's an impressive organization, and the more I know about it, the more I learn about it, the more impressed I am. I want to thank you, Doug, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I've read about the polls all the time in the paper. Whenever you come out with a new one, it seems to be there. I find them interesting, and I like statistics myself,
Good.
even though I did have a hard time with it.
You did all right, I'm sure.
I want to start out by talking a little bit about your background, because I noticed on the website that you work for Tenneco, and it's not in every academic doesn't go through that kind of a training process.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I graduated from college, I graduated from Drew University in New Jersey, but I was from this area. I went to Voorheesville High School. And so I came back here and worked for a consulting firm in Albany for 10 years and got an MBA at Siena College in the evening school. So I started teaching in the evening. As soon as I got my MBA, the dean offered me the job to teach at night, a couple of courses. So I did that. Then I got the opportunity to work for Tenneco down in Houston. So I left this area, went down to Houston to work for a few years. I really didn't like it that much. Houston was a tough city. The traffic down there is just terrific. I mean, from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night, you can't move. So I left and came back here, and then I went to teach at Siena full time. And I went to RPI to get my doctorate in statistics, and so that's how I ended up doing this.
And you also have some training in urban planning?
My degree was in the management school at RPI, and the program is urban and environmental studies, and then I concentrated in statistics under that program.
Okay. Well, that makes it even more valuable.
It is, although I don't do much in the urban planning area anymore, although some of my surveys touch on that.
Well, let's go into the Siena Research Institute a little bit. Talk about where it came from. It's a jewel of the area now.
It really is. We've gotten international attention, a lot of national attention, certainly big in New York State and regional. So we're all over the country at this stage. Matter of fact, we're coming out Monday with our third First Woman President's Poll, which we expect will get international attention because people all around the world are interested in, well, they're interested in how Hillary Clinton's going to do.
Absolutely.
So what happened was I went back to Siena full-time in 1979, and I'm a statistician, and I was talking to one of our history professors, Tom Kelly, who you may have known of, and I said, where did these presidential ratings come from? And he said, well, Arthur Schlesinger Sr., he's the father of the current historian, who was in Jack Kennedy's administration. He did some polls, so I looked those up. And in 1948, Arthur Schlesinger Sr. asked 75 of his friends to rate presidents, including his own son, and Felix Frankfurter, who was a justice on the Supreme Court, and a tremendous liberal bias in the poll. And so I looked at a statistician. I said, gee, this isn't very scientific at all. So I said to Tom, let me design one that's more mathematical, more statistical. So what we did was we came up with 20 categories to rate presidents, and we sent it out to historians all over the country, to every college in the country. And so we started that presidential rating, and it took off. I mean, got us national attention, and everybody was excited about it. Now people are copying our method. They've disbanded Schlesinger's method, and they use ours. So then we followed that up by rating first ladies, and no one else has ever done that.
Right.
And there are 3 books out on first ladies, and they're all full of our data and our ratings and so on.
Fantastic.
So from there, we have expanded, but that's how we got started.
And now you've taken on other aspects. You work with local companies. You will do whatever is needed, it seems.
Well, we now, on a regular basis, we do a New York State Consumer Confidence Index. We do a New York State political poll. We do a lot of public service polls. We just did one for the Red Cross. We've done it for the Anti-Tobacco Coalition. We've done it for the Cancer Society. We've done polls for open space projects, particularly in Saratoga County. So we're partly responsible for Southwest Airlines coming here. We did a poll for the airport authority.
Bravo.
They really wanted Southwest, and they wanted to do a poll of business leaders to see whether they would support Southwest, and our poll showed that they would. We also did poll for the CDTA about the light rail from Saratoga down to Albany, and basically we found out nobody would ride it. Okay, it's too bad, but these people are used to their cars, and so it showed that it wouldn't really be very successful economically. So, and then we do private polls for companies, and so we do a whole range of things. We do web polls for membership organizations. Okay, so we do public opinion polling, we do private polling as a public service, and we do private polling for companies or government agencies.
I want to talk about some of the actual results that you've had, but before we do that, let's go in just a little bit. I think there's some kind of basic questions that people often have about polls. They wonder how accurate are they, and I noticed that there was one thing that you had talked about and written an article about, and that was the plus or the minus, the 3 plus or the 3 minus. Some of us want to say, well, then it's even.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought your discussion of that was pretty interesting.
I did. I presented a paper in Seoul, Korea about 4 years ago at an international conference on statistics, because the media uses this term statistical dead heat if it's in the margin of error. And my argument is that that's not true. Even if the vote was, let's say we're looking at a political race, candidates A and B, and one had 45% of the vote and the other had 46% of the vote, you'd rather be the one with 46%. Your odds of winning are higher. Both of them, the polling will form a normal curve around both of those results, and so who's ever ahead, even by 1 point, has an advantage. Now, when we talk about a poll, let's say that has a margin of error of 5 points, let's say 40 against 45, the chance that they're tied is almost remote. It's about a 2% chance that they could possibly be tied.
Which doesn't equate to a plus or minus 2%.
That's correct. And so so whenever I see the media use that term, I try to correct them, but it's hard to do that.
I wouldn't want to have a 3% chance that I was going to win the election.
Yeah, that's correct. And you would much rather be ahead. Now, the other thing that happens is you got to realize, let's say the poll, election day is in November, and we're doing a poll in mid-October. We're not trying to predict the election at that stage. We're saying if the election were held today, this is what would happen.
Right.
And polls are very good. I mean, you have to almost be willful to do a bad poll. Now, can you do a bad poll? Absolutely.
Usually the people you survey would be maybe too similar or something like that?
Well, you could do the wording of the question,
Oh.
okay. All right. You could do some lead-in questions. For instance, you're familiar with the PCBs in the Hudson River. Well, there was a poll out, and the first question was, PCBs cause cancer, should we clean them up? Well, okay, who's going to say no to that? Okay?
Right.
So that's a very biased poll, okay? We don't do that kind of thing. Our polls, we test them, we use accepted wording. We belong to the National Association of public opinion pollsters that have a code of ethics, and we follow that. And any poll we do, we have to allow anyone else to copy it or duplicate it if they want to. So if they think our results are skewed, we have to provide them our questions and everything else. But you can certainly affect the poll by the wording, the order of the questions, and so on. But we don't do that, and most of the reliable people don't do it. Gallup doesn't do that. The other two colleges around here that in the area that poll and so on, they don't do that. We're really giving honest results.
Right. I think it's usually people who have a bias, that they have an interest in it coming out in a certain way, and they do the poll. Then it's kind of difficult probably to come up with the right questions, whereas an outsider has a better chance of framing it in neutral terms.
That's correct. And I, for instance, will get calls from people who want me to do, it's called a push poll, to try to support their agenda. And sometimes people will call me and they want me to do a poll and they want the results to go before the assembly. And they want the results to come out a certain way. And after a couple of minutes of talking to them, I say, you're talking to the wrong person. We won't do that kind of poll.
Right.
And we do no polls for political candidates. We do no polls for political parties. Okay, we maintain our integrity, and now we'll do a political poll for the newspaper or for the television station. All right, we have contracts with the Times
Right.
Union and Channel 13, and we'll do polls for them, but we won't do it for the candidate.
So it's a little bit If you don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question.
That's true. And we simply will not do anything that even compromises our academic integrity. We won't do it.
Great. Let's move now to some of the polls. The latest one is the Consumer Confidence Poll.
Right.
And has that been in the paper yet?
It was at the beginning of the month.
Okay.
We come out the beginning
Okay.
of the first week of every month. We come out.
So that looked good. It looked positive. Could we go into it a little deeper and maybe explore aspects of it?
Absolutely. What happened is when World War II was over, we were afraid that we would fall back into depression again. So we had the depression of the 1930s. World War II pulled it out of that. Okay, the men were over fighting. The women went into the factories. Rosie the Riveter,
Yeah.
and so on. So the University of Michigan in 1947 started a national consumer confidence index. The purpose of this poll, and people had a lot of money at that time, okay, but they were worried about spending it because their fear of falling back into depression. So this poll, the Consumer Confidence Index, is designed to measure people's willingness to spend as opposed to their ability to spend.
Right.
And so they started it. We then got their permission to do it in New York State. So we're the only one that can do the Michigan poll in New York State. We use their questions, we use their methodology, we use their calculations. So the results we get in New York, we can compare directly to the nation. And so we've been doing that. We started small in the Albany area in 1995, and then we expanded in January of 1999 for statewide. And now that poll is used by the Federal Reserve Board. It's published in their beige book. It's used by the New York State Department of Labor. It's used by the Comptroller's Office. It's used by the New York State Assembly. Nassau County on Long Island uses our results in their leading indicator for their county. So we do that every month. And it's a very interesting poll. You talk about leading polls and lagging polls. So this has both elements in it. For instance, we ask people about how are you financially as well off now as you were a year ago, or are you better off than you were a year ago? So we take that information and then we ask, what do you think you're going to be a year from now? How is business going to be a year from now? How is business going to be 5 years from now?
Are the answers are they quantitative or are they opinion? Do you feel that they're giving you, okay, I looked at my books, I'm making 2% more, or is it I feel more?
It's more of an opinion, okay? Although somewhat factual in the sense of, okay, I know how I was last year, and am I better off this year financially than I was a year ago? You have a pretty good idea of that now. Is pure opinion. Am I going to be better off a year from now? Is business going to be better off a year from now? So that's opinion, but that's what we're measuring, and that's what we want to find out. It's been a great indicator of potential spending. Okay, if we see the Consumer Confidence Index go up, then following that we'll see the spending go up. And so there's great correlation there. So it's been, not just for us, I mean, but nationally for the University of Michigan. So there's been great correlation, and there's a lot of interest in it. I mean, when it comes out every month nationally, and our New York State Index, I mean, when we release it, the day I release it, I do probably 20 to 30 interviews all across the state.
And you see stocks go up and down for things like this?
We do, sure.
Yeah.
You see the consumer confidence come up and come out, and then you'll see that stock market will react to that. And so when ours comes out, I mean, I'm doing radio and newspaper and television interviews from New York City to Buffalo, and there's great interest in it.
Now, what is the Conference Board? What do they do?
Conference Board is a different index. When I started this, I researched both of them. The Conference Board is a private board in New York City. They do a consumer confidence index. They're both good, okay? The Conference Board tends to be more volatile. Okay, their calculations, and in other words, Michigan might have a 5-point swing. Well, the Conference Board might get a 10-point swing, and 10-point swing sounds more dramatic than a 5-point swing, but it's really the same swing. So when you plot the two indexes together, they pretty well follow the same
So
trend.
they go in the same
Generally speaking, okay. The difference is Michigan is a telephone poll, and that's what we do. The Conference Board is a selected group of people, and it's a mail poll. And so it takes a little longer to collect and so on. But the reason I went with the University of Michigan is the United States Department of Commerce uses Michigan in their leading indicator index. And I talked with those people, and they felt it was a more solid index, And so that's why we went with
That's
Michigan.
impressive. Now, it was positive in terms of upstate New York. I think I recall a 5% swing, perhaps?
5 points.
5 points.
5 points up, and for the 5th month in a row.
And maybe one was actually over 100, and isn't 100 the...
100 is the benchmark.
Medium.
That's right. 100 is the benchmark, okay? And ever since 9/11, all right, we've been down, and upstate has been down since the Depression. Upstate New York never really recovered from the 1991 Depression. We lost all our manufacturing jobs
And
to the South.
That's 15 years ago.
It is, and the irony, of course, is the South is losing those jobs overseas now.
Yeah. I don't know if I feel better.
But we never, upstate New York never really recovered, and we're replacing high-priced manufacturing jobs with lower-priced service jobs. But now, from New York City up through the Hudson Valley through Albany is the best economy in the state by far. I mean, you look at Buffalo and Binghamton and Syracuse and Rochester, Western New York is much worse off than we are. As a matter of fact, the New York State, and I don't know their exact name, but it's their department that encourages business to locate here and so on. They just lumped Albany in with New York City in their figures.
I recall that, right.
Yeah.
And so they have a new definition.
A new
of west and
definition.
up and
That's
right.
correct. A new definition, and we're now lumped with New York City. And there was some grief over that. I mean, because geographically, we're not like New York City. Yet economically,
Buildings aren't as tall.
well, it's true, and not nearly as many people.
Right.
But economically, it does make some sense. We're the state capital, so we got a lot of state jobs. But New York City has a lot of state jobs because it's the big financial center and the biggest city in the state. So state jobs give you great stability. So there's some link as well there. I just wish we could get a high-speed rail line between here and New York.
Well, that last poll you had didn't help, but that was the light rail.
That was correct.
Right.
Yeah, then that was a commuter rail line between Saratoga and Albany, and we basically found out that people wouldn't really want to ride that. And the trouble with it is, if you lived in Saratoga, you got to drive to Saratoga Railroad Station, you got to get on the train, and then they're going to let you off down by the Palace Theater. Then you had to get over to the state complex from there, and then you had to reverse the process at the end of the day.
But if I could get on a train, get to New York City Airport in a reasonable amount of time, and a dependable train, why wouldn't I do that? I'd probably miss flights here.
I think that could happen, absolutely. On the other side of the coin, a lot of people from that area would move up here and would also come up here too. I mean, we have people now commuting from Hudson. And so if we had like the French and the Japanese have trains that do 200 miles an hour. I've been on both of them, and they're just a joy. I mean, you get on, they're clean, they're fast, and you don't even know you're moving.
Barely know you're moving.
And you're going 200 miles an hour. I mean, if we could do a train like that between here and New York City, it would be a boom for our economy.
It would be a boom. Yeah.
And you'd get there in less than an hour. You know, they're talking about high speed now and just knocking off 15 minutes. It doesn't seem like a lot to me.
So I don't know if there's anything more with consumer confidence, but let's just take one more crack at it. It's something that we would use for investments.
Correct.
And
it's a leading indicator of consumer spending, so business leaders are looking at it to see, are people going to spend? There are questions in their poll. Are you likely to buy in the next 6 months, and so on. So
and should I invest more in my business here?
Absolutely. Okay. So it clearly is a leading indicator and followed closely by the business people. The other thing we do the New York State one monthly. Quarterly, right. We do it by the 6 major cities. I'd love to do it monthly. We don't have enough resources given all the other things we have to do, but we do Albany, Binghamton, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, and New York City. And we started that in the quarter, and this was just a coincidence. We started in the quarter right after the 9/11 attacks. And of course, New York City got devastated by 9/11, and the consumer confidence plummeted overnight, and they lost 200,000 jobs in an instant.
That was extremely emotional, so when we talk about
absolutely.
Confidence.
Absolutely, and I had started our poll on the 1st of September, and I had to throw out the first 10 days because of that dramatic event.
It's too sad to answer the question.
It really was. But so we do that every quarter, so we've been doing that now for about 6 years, and all of that time, Albany or New York City has been number 1 in New York State. Okay, so the western part of the state, the other are all trading off the bottom part of that barrel. Of course, Buffalo was greatly dependent on auto jobs, and the auto industry in the United States has been suffering, so Buffalo is suffering.
Right, and we had a good infrastructure with schools, and that was a big one, and certainly transportation is good for New York, and the Valley is close to IBM. That's not far away.
Well, and of course, our economy in the Capital District, nearly half of it is state government and the other governments, but all governments, and we have a great healthcare industry here. I mean, a lot of excellent healthcare facilities. And then third is education. For a relatively small city, we've got 17 colleges and universities here. Of course, SUNY at Albany is a major research university for the state system. So those three together are about 50% of our economy. And so it gives us great stability. So the interesting thing with Albany is that when times are bad, and they have been bad for the last few years, you know, starting with the stock market crash in 2000 and then 9/11. All right, so times have been bad, so the numbers have been low, so we're the best of those numbers. Now, on the other side of the coin, if the economy really started to boom, we probably don't go up as fast as everybody else. So that stability keeps us closer to the average, closer to that 100 benchmark that you mentioned.
Right.
And so we don't go as low as everybody else in bad times, but we don't get as high as everybody else in high times.
But it's good to be over that 100 for the first time in a long time.
It would be, absolutely. Yep.
Now, you've also done surveys about Tech Valley, I believe. Something about the confidence or the feeling that this is going to grow?
Well, we have done, partly, for instance, in some of our other, for instance, Channel 13, we do some polls. So we've asked people about the effect of the Tech Valley and so on. And by and large, certainly everybody is afraid of, you know, traffic and jams and overgrowth and getting like Austin, Texas, which, you know, we actually had a delegation go down to Austin, Texas and view with this new plant coming here, is that going to overwhelm our system and so on like that. But on the other side of the coin, the business leaders and generally speaking the government leaders are supportive of this, but they want to do it right.
And in terms of jobs and the businesses that would bring them here,
sure,
this must be something that stimulates that consumer confidence.
Oh, absolutely, no question. And we can even see it spill over down the Mohawk Valley a little bit. Okay, so we have a strong economy from New York City up the Hudson Valley to Albany. And it hasn't spread out up the Mohawk Valley yet, but the people out there are hoping so, okay? People in Utica's had a depressed economy for quite a while now, and they're hoping that if this thing really takes off, that some of those jobs will go up the Mohawk Valley, and that will be good for the western part of the state as well.
Now you mentioned, I think it was in the article as well, the newspaper article, that we've got, what, 5 straight increases?
In consumer confidence.
In consumer confidence.
Right.
Can you forecast, or is there any statistical reliability here to say that we have some momentum?
Well, I certainly think we have some momentum. However, and that's a great question. Let me count. Am I willing to predict a straight upward trend? And I can't do that. It's really interesting. Consumer confidence is very fragile. The reason it's up right now is certainly energy prices, which scared people for a while, and gas prices were up around $3.
It's been cold now for the last 2 weeks.
And that's a factor, okay? So gas prices up around $3 scared people. We're now used to $2, okay?
Right.
And Saudi Arabia just came out and said they're going to try to peg oil at $50.
Because they said 32.
Yeah, now they're up to 50. And that translates into now $2 gas in the United States, okay? So if energy prices stay level, of course, one of the reasons we've had a nice October, November, December, and first half of January.
Right.
All right, that's a factor. Stock market's been hitting new highs. It hit a new high yesterday. Employment has been good. The jobs aren't the great high-priced manufacturing job, but unemployment is low. And again, in our area, unemployment is very low. We have the lowest unemployment in the state. And so you got all of those economic factors coming together. We have low inflation. We have relatively low interest rates. Now, if any one of those things turns negative, then our trend is off, okay?
Right.
If we get up to $3 a gallon for gas, and you point out how cold it's been, now the heating bills are going to come in big. Those things could turn us around here. So consumer confidence is very fragile. It adjusts very, very quickly. So I'm not ready to say we're going to go on an upward trend for a year here or anything like that. If things stay positive, energy prices stay low, inflation stays low, interest rates stay low, jobs stay steady, then I think we can see a nice trend up here. And the weather doesn't get too bad, okay? But again, these questions are long-term in nature, okay? So we're asking, how are you going to be next year? How is business going to be in 5 years? So the fact that we've had this cold snap isn't going to really have tremendous impact,
Right.
okay, unless things really get bad and energy prices go up.
I think we feel it was a significant event, as they called it in the weather, and it probably it's not going to last.
Yeah,
It's almost
certainly,
spring.
yeah, and we're getting 3 more minutes of daylight every day now.
Right, I
and
noticed that.
It is. I mean, and it's very noticeable this
Yeah.
time of year.
Yeah.
You know, like in the fall, it gets depressing when you lose 3 minutes. But right now, we're almost 2 months away from the shortest day of the year already, and so you can notice it's brighter in the morning and brighter at night, and so. Sunlight helps people's feelings. Okay, it's nice to have sunlight.
I can
I heard
relate.
on the news this morning. Yesterday was 0% sunlight. Okay,
That's not a lot.
Yeah.
No. We don't have a lot more time, so I just want to maybe touch on a few of the other surveys you've done, because there have been some interesting ones. One that intrigued me was preparedness for emergencies.
Okay.
We had a program on that, and someone talked about all the things we had to do. And you found some interesting things that, on the one hand, there was bright spots, but some not so bright spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. The Red Cross approached us, and what happened there? Remember the floods back in June? Okay, that hit like from Utica down through Binghamton, and so
Right.
on. And
Right,
those
and the canal was closed.
Oh,
and-
yeah. I have a brother and sister-in-law who live in Walton, New York. I mean, he's a lawyer there, and he happened to be up here at Albany. And his office was flooded. His secretaries couldn't get out of the office for 2 days. I mean, those people got devastated. And yet in Albany, nothing happened. And so the head of the Red Cross here, who has those western counties on the fringe of his district, he
Right.
said, you know, people out there are very upset that nobody in Albany is paying attention to this. So we want to do a poll and investigate the different things. And those people, I mean, they really got hurt. And in Albany, we weren't touched by it, and so he wanted to do this poll and bring alertness to this, and also to have people prepared for their emergencies. So the poll asked questions like, do you have an emergency kit in your house? Do you have an evacuation plan? Do you have a plan to meet your relatives? One of the things that happened with Katrina down in New Orleans, people separated. They couldn't find their pet. They couldn't find their spouse. They had never made a plan and saying, okay, if we get separated, we're going to meet at point X. And so the Red Cross wanted to use this, not so much to find out what actually happened, but to alert people and to educate people on the things they can do in case we get hit with a disaster.
And it also educates community leaders as to what to focus on. Our EMS department is really involved heavily in trying to get people to learn CPR. They have a new method.
Mm-hmm.
And the poll found that quite a few people had received that training, more than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it indicated that if it was easy to get to and local, people would take that. They would like to have that.
But it looked like the things they hadn't done, and maybe that's the two things. You mentioned one, the fact that they haven't organized, and this is probably the easiest thing to do, where they would meet and who they would call and where they would go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In an ideal world, you should have a plan for your house. Then you should have a kit that's right by your door, and that you can just pick up and leave your house if a flood is coming. Okay, pick this kit and go. And of course, the trouble with these things is they got batteries in them, and so
Right.
and food in them.
So
and
there's thinking and planning.
yeah, and so you have to update this thing periodically and so on. So a lot of people didn't have those things and so on. And so that's what the Red Cross wanted to do. They wanted to alert people that they can do these things and they will be better off.
This has been interesting. I do want to put up the website for the Siena Research Institute, because you have many of the studies that you've done up there. People can read about them, and it's certainly useful information when we want to plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope perhaps you'll come back another time. and-
Absolutely, yeah.
and join us.
I enjoyed this.
Went so quickly.
It did, yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for watching, invite you to watch our next show, and wish you a great week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.